Hello everyone, my name is Hassan Ali and I'm joined by Rupesh Atway. When the T20 World Cup began, there were a lot of murmurs and discussions about how this World Cup group stage will be quite boring. Why? Because it is filled with fixtures of associate nations. Yet we saw a completely different script. In the very first match itself between Pakistan and Netherlands, the associate nations showed that they belong. If it weren't for Max O'Dowd's dropped catch and Fahim Ashraf's heroics, Netherlands and an associate nation would have started the World Cup with a victory. Something that is very unusual even in today's cricketing day and age. In this video, we will look at where the Netherlands team excelled, who were their best batsmen, bowlers, fielders, what are things that they can improve on, who is the player to watch, and what were their X factors. Many of us have watched the games, so we won't really be going into the details of the matches, but rather the squad and the path moving forward. This is our exclusive video on Netherlands, and this is cricket. So, Rupesh, let's get started. What are your opinions as a neutral? What did you think of the Dutch performance at the group stages?
I guess it's very good to see their performance. The way they started the tournament against Pakistan, even against India, despite the dropped catches, they had put up a very tough competition. They had a very good control over India and Pakistan matches. With USA, they were not able to perform well, and again they had a very good, comfortable win against India. But overall, they had turned out to be a good contender in this group, I would say.
Yeah, I think if they had caught those catches against Pakistan and India, this group would have looked very different. To give five chances to Indian batsmen in their own backyard is a crime, right? You can't expect to win a game like that. But you spoke of the Namibia game. The Namibia game was their only victory in the group stage. But it also kind of goes to show that they're head and shoulders above the other associate nations. I think along with Nepal and maybe even the USA in the same group, Netherlands are right up there with some of the best associate nation teams.
Exactly.
But there are certain standout performances. And I think you spoke of the Namibia game, so I'll start with that. The Namibia game was a record-breaking game, primarily for Bas de Leede. Bas de Leede scored the most runs in the tournament for Holland. He had 158 runs with an average of 52.66, healthy strike rate of 139, and the highest score of 72 not out versus Namibia. And he also chipped in with the ball. And, throughout the tournament, he's carried the batting unit. The next highest scorer for Holland is Scott Edwards, the wicketkeeper captain, with just 90. So the drop from 158 goes down to 90. And we saw throughout the tournament that whenever Bas de Leede had a good game, Netherlands had a good game. But this also goes to show the weakness that Holland currently have is that they are completely dependent on one batsman. And if that batsman does not fire, the next best batting option only scored 90 runs across four games. In that game against Namibia as well, when he scored 72 not out, I mentioned that he took two wickets. He's the only Dutch player in the history of ICC Men's T20 World Cup history to score a 50 and take two wickets. And the 72 not out that he scored against Namibia was the joint second highest individual score by a Dutch player in a T20 World Cup. So, you can't ignore the achievements that this Dutch team has. The only downside is that Bas is 35 years old. So, who's going to be in his place? Who's going to take that role that he's been playing? Even when he came on to bat and one down against India, he scored at 23 balls, 33. And he tried to take on spin early, which is something the Dutch player was really struggling to do. So his key to success in this tournament was how well he played spin, which is something the Dutch players have struggled against. However, I would also like to add that the Dutch side, the Dutch batting side in general, deal with spin a lot better than associate nations. They came up against a well-resourced Pakistani spin bowling attack, but they did really well to take that game deep. And if you ask me, Netherlands should have won that game. They threw it away. But should have, would have, could have have been the story of the associate nations. in the T20 World Cup so far. No?
Absolutely. I think, except for D League's overall all-round contribution, the team really struggled with the batting. Now, there are decent performance in the bowling. What do you think about the bowling?
Yeah, so the bowling was quite different. First and foremost, we have to mention Aryan Dutt. Aryan Dutt was opening the bowling with his right arm off spin, mixes that up. He has a few variations. Um, he will never forget that he dismissed Abhishek Sharma on zero. That's a wicket that he'll remember for the rest of his life.
Yes.
And he also had success against Pakistan, removing, for example, the Pakistani captain as well. So he's had some notable dismissals. He's an extremely passionate lad. You always hear him on the stump mic every time he gets a wicket. But despite Aryan Dutt's contributions, Logan van Beek was the leading wicket.
Wicket.
7 wickets, average of 20.42. He was the most consistent wicket-taking options every time Holland needed a wicket. Edwards would toss the ball to Logan van Beek. He was well supported by, as I said, Aryan Dutt with 5 wickets. And we also spoke about Bas de Leede, who also had 5 wickets. So the bowling is a lot more complete. And we can't forget that Paul van Meekeren, their most experienced fast bowler, was injured after the first game. So that must have been a loss for them. But still, to have other bowlers like Aryan, De Leede, and Van Beek put their hands up makes Holland's bowling unit quite competitive. They weren't blown away. They weren't getting hit for 200 plus scores. Despite the fact that they had 300 alert warnings against them, they pulled their weight.
True.
A proper bowling attack. And we also can't forget that this bowling attack has Rolf van der Merwe, 41-year-old, played for South Africa, and now is playing for Holland. He brings a wealth of experience that I think accumulates to more than the entire Dutch team combined. But to have someone like that of that experience probably goes a long way.
As you were speaking about Van der Merwe, interestingly, he's the leading catch taker for the Netherlands team with 6 catches in the tournament. And after that, the second highest is 2 catches.
Oh,
So
3 times as less.
yes. So the team is relying on one player as much for the fielding as well.
Yeah, and if you watch the matches, and if you just combine the dropped catches from the Pakistan and India games, that's a total of 6. That's as many as Van der Merwe has taken across 4 matches. Netherlands' ground fielding was great, was fantastic, but their catching was not that good. And as we have mentioned, Fahim's catch being dropped by Max O'Dowd, and then Michael Levitt dropping Surya Kumar, who then went on to play a crazy knock. You wonder, what if those catches were taken? And so batting and fielding, there is an over-dependence on individuals. Bowling, however, seems more complete.
So who is your player to watch in this team?
Easy question, I think. Zach Lion-Cachet, if I'm pronouncing that right. He's this 22-year-old kid. He is the future of Dutch cricket, if I can put it that way. If on one end we have Bas de Leede, who's 35 and literally carrying the team on his back. On the other hand, we have a youthful product in the Dutch team who's fully committed to playing cricket, strong athletic base. He's played football for Southampton in the English Premier League's youth divisions. So he is a superstar athlete. He could have pursued both sports. He chose to pursue cricket. And he kind of represents that next phase of the Dutch cricketing identity. Did he have a good tournament? No. He had a few failures, but what he did have was an interesting 26-run innings of 16 balls against India, where he showed that he has the ability to play against at least India's part-timers, because by the time he came to bat, there were some players like Shivam Dubey and Abhishek Sharma bowling. So he was able to capitalize on that, but in terms of just the future, there's a lot of excitement around him. It's really interesting. Zach's father, Chad, represented the national Dutch rugby team. His mother is a former British number 1 in tennis. Before becoming a Netherlands international in cricket, Zach was an aspiring footballer and was even on Southampton's books. During his time with the club, he crossed paths with Jude Bellingham, and also Zach's cousin plays for Paul Royals in the SA20. So essentially he comes from a cricketing family. Zach has actually worked a lot with Gary Kirsten, and he actually recommended the youngster's name to Netherlands head coach Ryan Cook, and he also told him about his Dutch heritage, which would make English-born Zach eligible to play for Holland. And he's primarily a batting all-rounder, but he can ball quite a bit. He balls a little bit of spin, but batting is his main forte. But not a lot of sample sizes yet to assess, but there's a lot of excitement because it's rare for the Dutch to see a talent of this sort at the age of 22.
Interesting. Who would be your X factor in this team?
I think Bas de Leede, three-dimensional player, contributed with the bat significantly, contributed with the ball. He's also the symbolic figure, if I can put it that way, of sacrifice because he was offered a full-time county deal in England, but he let that go. He didn't sign on because he wanted to play for Holland. And what that does is it sets a great example for the future generations to come, right? That you can choose your country, you can choose your national pride over a paycheck. And it was Durham County, quite a prolific county, that offered him to fully commit to the county system, but he refused and chose to go with Netherlands. And another thing that I would really like to remind our viewers is that the last time that Holland played uh, in India, it was in the ICC World Cup of 2023. In that match, Bas de Leede balled the most expensive spell in ICC men's ODI history. He conceded 115 in 10 overs and against Australia. And 3 years later, in the same ground in the Firozshah Kotla, he scores that 70 not out against Namibia and takes 2 wickets to become the first ever Dutch player to achieve a 50 and 2 wicket haul in an ICC T20 game. So he literally came back to the same place where he had hit a low and he hit an all-time high, not only for himself, but for his country. And I think that speaks volumes of his character. It also speaks volumes of his leadership abilities in the sense of leading by example. And it goes to show leading run scorer, third highest, second joint highest wicket taker, second joint highest catch taker. It just shows you that the game or the team rests on his shoulders.
Hopefully, youngsters get inspired by the sacrifice he has made.
For sure, but at the same time, when we speak about the lead, we also have to speak about the areas of growth. Holland, as we had already mentioned, are over-dependent on Bas de Leede in batting, over-dependent on Rolf and de Merwe in fielding. They need to figure out to play as a team. They can't keep relying on individual performances to pull them through the match. And all those half chances and those dropped catches need to be eradicated. I think that's the easiest fix. Can they fix their catching and maintain their composure in a high pressure situation? It did surprise me a little that they weren't able to manage the pressure as such because just before the World Cup, they added a psychologist by the name of Tom Dawson-Squibb. And the idea was to help these associate players deal with the sort of level that they're operating at because they don't get a lot of exposure to this level. But one is playing against such big nations, and secondly, Holland barely has any experience of playing under light.
Yes, which their coach has brought up after the loss to USA, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, and that was their most comprehensive defeat. And the fact to back that up is that between the 2024 and 2026 T20 World Cup, Holland only played 3 20Is under the lights.
That's very disappointing.
That's very disappointing. So then what happens is that, maybe their US loss can be partly attributed to the lack of night game exposure. The American players, because of the MLC, have a little bit of more exposure playing under the lights. Yes, it's halfway across the country, but Holland don't even have that.
Right.
So that I don't feel is like an area of growth, but I feel that that is something that if it was in their favor, it could have helped them perform better. And like we always say, the associate nations need more fixtures against full test playing nations. I think a great solution for this can also be that the associate nations can play against the A sides of the test playing nations. They can play against India A, they can play against Pakistan Shaheens, they can maybe play against the English Lions. That way, they're competing at a very high level, grooming their games, and also the test playing nations get a challenge. So, apart from that, really, if you compare and contrast their trajectory and their growth, I think Holland has consolidated now. They started defeating the South Africans, they started defeating the English sides and all of that well before COVID. But now it's about taking it to the next level. Can they be a Zimbabwe, for example? Can they pull off a bunch of sets and progress to the next level of a World Cup? Can they do what Afghanistan did, right? They also started as an associate nation, but a decade later, or a decade and a half later, they're in a much stronger position. Holland has been in cricket longer, but unfortunately, they haven't been able to grow.
I agree. They had a decent tournament. The skill that they have shown years down the line, definitely this team can turn from an associate nation to a full member nation in the sport. Also, speaking about the exposure in the European Cricket League, we have the Amsterdam team, which is owned by Steve Waugh.
Oh,
This also helps them to rub their shoulders with the international cricketers. And apart from that, even with their domestic cricket league, there has been some restructuring in their top class cricket league, which is a 50 over format. But they have restructured it last year to make it more competitive. The decrease from 10 teams to 8 teams. That also helps. Now, of course, it's not T20, but still, it helps them in improving their skill set. So now that it's more competitive. And on top of that, they are also a very good contender in the League 2 cycle of the ODI World Cup for the 2027 qualifiers. So yes, they are getting good exposure, and down the line, let's see how the team performs.
on that rather inquisitive note, we'd like to bring this video on Holland to an end. We hope you enjoyed our first ever discussion of an associate nation, and we'd like to thank the Dutch for performing so well that we had no choice but to acknowledge their performances. My name is Hassan Ali. I was joined by Rupesh Atmuri, and behind the camera this time was Sharan Kumar. We'll speak to you some other day, some other time. Please like, comment, and subscribe.